steely-eyed killer shadow in the night. You were born to fight. You gotta light 'em up.
My name is John Krotec, and I want to welcome you to Straight Outta Combat Radio, audio medicine by Green Zone Hero. We're here to honor the wisdom of America's most valuable asset for combat veterans. We're authentic, we're empowering, we're American.
Save us all before they burn it down.
Welcome back to another Straight Outta Combat Radio episode. I'm here today with a friend, but also a very courageous veteran, United States Army. She's a sister. Her name is Alexandria White. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll get into her story. But thanks for coming back. Alexandra, I met a few years ago down in Sarasota when I was living there. And I'm not really sure what it was through. Maybe she can school me on that. But I think it was like something to do with veterans, I'm sure. And we struck up a conversation, struck up a friendship. And it's been, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And we've kind of always touched base just to trade stories and to see what each other's doing. And now she's doing a lot of cool things. She was a U.S. Army veteran, went to basic training at Fort Leonard Wood out in Missouri, and then got her medical training at Fort Sam Houston. She learned a lot about resilience and a lot about teamwork and a lot about her craft. And she ended up in Iraq. And not sure exactly where she was at. She's going to tell us about that. But she did some things in Iraq and also was confronted with some other challenges. And then she came back, and she didn't just sit around and wallow in the mire. She went to work. You know, I know that she got into some financial planning. She's in the real estate now. And she's also working as a director at the Long Walk Home. If you didn't listen to the episode before this, please do. That's the founder and chief Long Walk Home guy, Ron Zaleski. But here's Alexandra White, and welcome, Alex. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, John. Thank you for having me. Little correction really quick. I was in Kuwait.
Okay. So you were, well, you're aging yourself. Yeah, okay, we get it. So you were in Kuwait, but you were supporting something going on in Iraq.
Yes, we were a forward operational base. We were a FOB.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for that correction, and we'll get to that. But, you know, before we get to Kuwait, let's talk a little bit about you and where you grow up and how you even made it to the Army. Tell us a little bit about that, Alex.
I was born in Florida, in Hollywood, and I lived with my father, who was Air Force, and my World War II grandfather, Navy. And so I grew up around the military. I kind of understand it. And then I moved with my mother as a younger child to North Carolina and grew up in the mountains of North Carolina. And then, of course, normal teenage life and high school, and didn't exactly know where I fit in, but I knew that I wanted to run away. So what I did is I joined the Army. Thought I was going to find love because my leave date was February 14th.
Wow. Well, yeah, that's interesting. But so I guess you were in Western North Carolina. You would have been a mountain girl up there, or a mountain woman.
Bat Cave, North Carolina.
Yeah, there you go. That's near, not too far from Asheville, actually. But that's a neat place to grow up. And you know, needless to say, you expounded on it. You had military in your background. So you had military and love in your eyes, and you went to Fort Leonard Wood. Tell us about basic training, and was that a shock to you?
Basic training was a shock. I wasn't an exemplary soldier. I mean, to be really honest, the best way to describe me in boot camp was Private Benjamin.
Oh, I got a visual of that, but yeah, good. So,
oh yeah, that was definitely me.
Can you tell us anything? Can you share a story of basic training where you thought, well, what the hell am I doing here? Or what did I do? Or this is really cool. Can you share something with us?
I think the wake-up call was when you get off that plane and you think that you're, a teenager, you're going to be exciting. And then all of a sudden this, guy walks up to you and just starts screaming at you for no reason. You don't even know him. It's like, well, hello. No, we're going to scream at you for the next 90 days. And, and there's like, you learn what drop means. It's like, I didn't even know what drop meant when I showed up off the bus, and they're like, drop. It's like, oh, push-ups. Yeah, I got this. And, but the run seemed the hardest for me, like, cause I wasn't a runner, but everything else physically I could do great, but the thing that I loved the most was the M16 training, because I'm a a good girl with guns, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I missed marksmanship, and that's what I got, but I missed sharpshooter by 1 point, by one shot. So
I get it. Yeah, the rifle range was fun. And so I'm thinking, okay, Alex Benjamin, you're there, you're getting to shoot firearms or weapons, what we call them. And then you're getting in shape. And yeah, the runs I wasn't a runner either. I did well because they trained us up for it. By the time we were taking those PT tests, we were passing them. So you obviously got through and graduated. What was graduation like for you? How did you feel?
it was a sense of accomplishment because I had actually completed something. It was the first time, like in my life, that I had actually completed something. So it was a sense of, wow, you're actually becoming an adult. You go from high school into the army, and you don't have a choice but to grow up. And you do grow up in 90 days. There's a lot of people that you meet, and the interesting thing about the military and basic is it's like a melting pot. It's like you've got everybody from every walk of life. And just a shout out, Private Cuevas is the one that helped me through my run. And I thank him to this day, because I can still run about this much because of that young man.
Are you still in contact with him? Are you guys still in contact?
No, absolutely not. I haven't had contact with him since AIT school, but
wow.
Yeah. But the main thing that I took away from boot camp was acknowledging that I had a little bit of resilience. Like I could actually push myself to keep going, because lazy when I first got there should have been my middle name. It's like Private Lazy.
No, I get that, but yeah, so it is a sense of accomplishment. Did anybody from your family show up for your graduation?
Yes, my mom and dad showed up for
Awesome.
graduation. They flew out. They were really excited. They were very proud of me as well.
Well, you didn't go too far. You just went south into Texas to Sam Houston you mentioned AIT, which is Advanced Individual Training, which is where you get your specialty. What was
Yes.
Sam Houston like?
It was a blast. It was more, you train Monday through Friday, and to be honest, you're partying on the weekends in San Antonio on the Riverwalk, which is a beautiful town. But in the Army on base, it's the first time that you actually get to explore the post you're on, because you don't get to walk around Leonard Wood. But Fort Sam Houston, just some of the architecture, because I'm an architecture girl, I loved it. And the training that you get, I mean, of course, there's a lot of stations that you go to that you might get a no-go at, because medical training is difficult. It's a lot of information that's crammed in a very short period of time. While I was at AIT school, I got delayed, which kind of helped me out. And then I was transferred from there to Fort Hood, Texas. So I stayed in Texas.
So you were a medic?
Yes.
What is that? That's a 90 series or
It was a 91 Bravo when I was in the military. I think it's like a whiskey now. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So that is a tough MOS. How many weeks were you there at Sam Houston?
You do your first 12 weeks. I'm not exactly sure how long I was there, because again, I had some medical issues and I got delayed.
Right.
I'd have to rack my brain for exactly how many months I was there, but I'm thinking I was there almost 12 months.
Well, that's cool. So, and you obviously graduated through that. And what was your first duty station when you finished at Sam Houston?
I went to the 15th FSB 1st Cav.
Which is where?
Fort Hood, Texas.
Okay, so it's like a mechanized infantry post then.
No, Fort Hood is one of the largest bases in the United States.
Yeah.
So it's got 1st Cav, 4th ID, Signal, Delta, and then there was one other, another communication that I can't remember. But I mean, it is one of the largest bases that we have.
Yeah, if I remember Fort Hood, I was 4th ID, and so when I got out, a little bit before you, they were in the process of getting ready to go to Fort Hood, and I think now they're back at Fort Carson. So it's kind of interesting. I guess we're not supposed to talk about that sensitive stuff, but so what was going on at Fort Hood then when you got to your unit, your Cav unit?
When I got to the Cav unit, it was more of just getting to figure out where you're going to be. What are you doing in the motor pool? What is your exact duties going to be? Because you're still doing medical training and, you know, your upkeep for your licenses and things, but you normally are in the motor pool. I was had a charge of a deuce and a half. Loved it. You
Yeah.
can't imagine me driving a deuce and a half with a water buffalo, but I can actually do it.
That's great. I was gonna say that's crazy. You know, the first person I met that says they loved everything about their training except for basic. But so, you know, so you're going through these days, you know, are you still training in the medical profession, or you're just nursing this deuce and a half? What's going on?
A little bit of both. I actually got placed in the clinic, in the medical clinic, and I worked with several lieutenants and the doctors in that clinic, which was a phenomenal experience. I mean, because I didn't have firsthand knowledge of, you know, actual on hands training. So when you go into the medical clinic, you actually get to see all kinds of things. You know, they come in for colds and, you know, just normal sickness. I mean, it's a regular clinic, but you start it real early in the morning, about 5:30, and you don't get done until the late afternoon, you know, and it was more camaraderie with the group of people that we had. So work was work, but for me, Fort Hood was about the people. I'm a people person in general.
Yes.
So the people that we met and the things and activities that we did as groups is one of the biggest things that sticks out to me. You know, like when we did field training and we're in the M113, you know, we're medics, so we really don't get off, but we get to get into the other ones and see some of the people that were in, you know, 1-5 on the tanks, you know, the tanker units. And we got to get on some of the tanks, which was really exciting because you're not really supposed to be driving a tank. But when you're out there, almost the M113 is kind of similar because it's a track vehicle. So
Yeah, it's armored
that was a
personnel.
lot of fun, you know. And again, of course, I like weaponry training. So every time we went to the range, I was like a kid in a candy store.
Nice. Well, that's the kind of soldiers that we want, right?
Yeah.
You know, excited, enthusiastic, and resilient, and smart, and able to perform the mission and duty. So how long are you at Fort Hood before you deploy to Kuwait? What was going on?
Yeah, we left in 97. But I would like to back up if I may, because there's
Okay.
a big section that we're avoiding. So again, being a very people person, I enjoyed meeting new people, but it also put me into an environment that was unsafe. And more after looking at it, you know, after the event 20 years later, it was more about how I put myself in certain circumstances. But the military to a certain day or an evening, I should say, was great. Like everything was perfect. And then an event happened in the barracks to me and life changed. I became a downward spiral of I don't want to do, you know, I don't want to be here anymore.
Mm.
And then just to briefly touch on that circumstance, there was an episode in the barracks that ended up with MST and enough, right?
Yeah, and I obviously unexpected and uncalled for on with every respect. And yeah, sorry that happened, but you know what? But you talked about being resilient, and you got through it as much as you can, I guess. And I know
And
a
that's
little
one
bit
of the
about that.
biggest
So, yeah.
reasons that I, you know, agreed to come on the show with you and discuss what happened.
Yeah.
Again, we've been friends for, you know, 5-6 years, and you've heard the story, like the full story of it.
Yes.
And it was difficult, but I want to make sure that people understand that the military was really, really good for me before that event. And then I'd
Right.
like to discuss after that event, you know, from the heartache and the heartbreak of you just lost the soldiers that you thought you were going to trust and be with, and they were going to have your back. And then right after this, here you ship off to Kuwait in your turmoil in your head of, you know, things that went down.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's tough. So you put as much behind you as you can, and you still have a work to perform, and you're in Kuwait, and your head's scrambled. What are you doing in Kuwait? What's going on?
We were basically just motor pulling. We go out, we got to Camp Doha and we did all our, PMS on our vehicles and made sure that our equipment was all good. And, we're figuring out where we're going to go and how the convoy was going to work. And then we got out to our fob. And then it was basically just training and practicing, and the helicopters would come in and bring people in, and basic setup. I mean, because being a forward operational base, we were setting up for what was to come.
Okay, so basically OJT, but in a real environment.
Yes.
Yeah. So how long were you in Kuwait?
6 months.
6 months. And did you get a chance to go travel anywhere while you were there, or were you just in Kuwait the whole time?
Well, exactly how far we were with our fob, I'm not exactly sure. I know it was quite a distance, so I'm assuming that it was in Iraq, but I can't guarantee you that. We were in the middle of a desert, so I can't remember 25 years ago exactly that location. I'm sure I could ask some of the people that we were with, but I don't remember. But we did get off, and when we went into, the city in Kuwait, it was great. We went to, a couple of festivals and went to the market, which I had experienced some weird foods that I didn't think I was going to eat. But when you're over there, you kind of do what you want. And we had gone to one of the palaces where they had opened it up for an R&R weekend for us,
Right.
which was on the Persian Sea, which was amazing. I walked out and they had big silver dollars. I mean, huge ones. And it was a beautiful, amazing place. I mean, yeah, you wouldn't think that. You see on TV, it's like a sandbox. Everybody thinks they lived in a desert, but when you think of an oasis, it really is. It was beautiful.
So did you have any encounters with the famed desert spiders or any camels? Did anything happen there with those animals, or no?
Yeah, no spiders, but camel, yes. If I can throw myself under the bus, I lost a bet and somebody dared me to drink camel pee. Yes, yes, I know. But I did lose the bet around a bunch of other high-ranking officials. So I was like, yep, I got this.
Oh my gosh. So what was it like? Did it taste like chicken?
No, it was awful. But I got to get on the camel because of it. I was so excited just to be able to ride a camel, and that was kind of like the punishment. Like, you can't ride the camel unless you did it. I'm there. It was very interesting. But that was
fun.
just down in the actual city. So
that sounds like a Private Benjamin moment, I'm visualizing that in the movie, right? So let me see. So you jockey a camel, you go to the festival, you're out in the desert in the middle of flipping nowhere. What was it like at night? What was the sky like?
Oh, it was beautiful. Like, because it was completely open canvas. I mean, you really didn't have clouds. So the stars, it was like being in your own private, oh my gosh, I'm losing the word for the telescope domes.
Your own observatory.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm just thinking about it.
I would lay on our bench. Like, we had our wooden benches, our picnic tables, and I would just lay on the picnic tables and just watch it. And a bunch of us girls, because we were all together for females. And but we would just sit there and watch the skies, But the sandstorms, oh my goodness. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face because of some of the sandstorms. They were horrible.
So you must have got sand like everywhere. Must have just
Everywhere,
been,
in your ears, up your nut. I mean, everywhere. The sand was, you would get a warning though, because I mean, you could see it like sheets coming in. So you would know it was coming. Like in Florida, how we have the hard rains and you can see the dark rain coming.
just rolling in, yeah.
Just rolling in. You could see the sand rolling in. And command would send out, notifications like, we've got a sandstorm coming, get prepared, bunker down, get the vehicles all canvassed up and, and camouflage. But normally we'd hide in your tent the best you could,
Yeah, I mean, just hope for the best. So you're there for 6 months, and then you rotate back to the States.
I have one more adventure.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Tell us whatever you want to tell us.
The USO people came out, and it was the Dallas Cowgirl cheerleaders, And we had all, the girls that were stationed with us all got together and we talked to Sergeant Major Kennedy. And he was our director or sergeant major out there. And he was in charge and directing these girls. Well, they put me in charge of their security.
Awesome.
Like, okay. Yeah. So I got to meet these girls and see their interactions with the soldiers and how the soldiers interacted with them. But the kicker was what happened after they left, because a lot of the guys had different thoughts for us girls that we were there, not just soldiers. As you know, y'all are some pretty girls. We've been out here a long time, and things just kind of fell through again. So you get put back on that rocky ship of you've just lost everything back here in the States, and now it's happening again here in Kuwait. So a little different circumstances, but still, it was just sexual harassment at that point, So it was a constant struggle in the military because of the sexual harassment.
Yeah. Again, I have to say, when I was in the service, I guess I was blessed to not experience or see any of that. I don't know if it comes from the leadership. I'm sure some of it does, but I know that the leaders that I served with, had any of that ever happened in any of the units that I was attached to, those soldiers would have been 86, probably walked out of the Army, because I had two hardcore first sergeants that didn't tolerate sexual harassment. And we had some women in some of the sister units, some of the brother sister units. And I didn't see any of that. So we were fortunate. Sorry you had to go through that. And I've heard that it's not uncommon in some units.
No, actually, the statistic that's going to hurt the most is it's 1 in 20 are sexually assaulted in the military. That's men and females. So not assaulted, sexually harassed or assaulted, it's 1 in 20 in the military.
And those are probably the ones that are brave enough to come forward. It may even be higher.
Right. I mean, I didn't come forward at all. It took me years to acknowledge the fact that I wasn't guilty for that. And I know that sounds weird, but I always blamed myself because I had thought it was my fault because I had drank too much that night. And I put that burden on me because when I did express it to some of the other people that were not really my top tier chain of command, but a little bit under, it was swept under the carpet. Like, well, what were you doing? Where were you at? Were you drinking? And it's like, it just got in my head that it was my fault. You'd be in the NCO club, you drink too much, but the circumstances of being taken there and what happened wasn't my fault. But it took me literally almost 20 years to acknowledge that fact that it wasn't my fault. And the PTSD after the military service is what really is the problem. And I say is the problem because I still have problems with PTSD because of the gang rape.
Yeah, and I was assaulted too, but in a different way, not in the service, as a child. So I understand some of those blaming and feeling guilty and feeling shame. And it's kind of like a vicious cycle. So, my foray into post-traumatic stress started in the summer of the 3rd grade. So I know a little bit about the resilience and about the guilt and the shame that we carry with us. And you're totally right. And, I lived life on the edge in many, many ways, and I self-sabotaged many things. And it was always alcohol, which soothes the pain, the emotional pain. But it's explained to me like this, Alex, the triggers, the memories don't change. They're always there. But what changes is the way that we react to it. And so thank you for, having the courage. I said at the beginning of this interview that you were one of the most courageous people I know. And because you're willing to tell your story, and it's a tough story, and nobody deserves that. And I agree with you. It's not your fault. And unfortunately, some of us takes a long time to learn that. It took me a DUI and a traumatic brain injury to finally come clean with something that I kept hidden for 42 years. So I get it. God bless you, honey. So you're back. Yeah.
Well, one of the things, as you mentioned, the self-sabotage. So after those events happened, it was for me a complete self-sabotage. I mean, I had been looking for ways, I needed out. I wanted out of the service. I wanted to stay in some regards because I made this commitment to the Army and my country, but at the same time, I didn't feel safe anymore. I felt more scared. You come out of the military thinking, or boot camp in AIT thinking you are 10 feet tall and bulletproof. You really do. And then something like that impacts you, and it's like a stop. It's just you just got hit by a Mack truck. So I started self-sabotaging, and I did start drinking heavily. And one thing led to another. And I talked to another soldier, and he was like, "Oh, if you want out, smoke pot, they'll throw you out." So
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, there's my out." And I thought in my head, if I could just self-sabotage myself, that would make everything better. But unfortunately, the chain of command saw what was going on. They knew something was wrong with me. They let me move off base out of the barracks, even under a PFC. I mean, I think I was an E2 when they let me move off base, which is unheard of,
Yeah.
a private to have their own home off base.
Well, you just raised real quick. You just raised a really good thought in my head about leadership and leadership that isn't tuned into their soldiers. And if they are tuned in, there's a way that enables the problem to continue to exist. And I would just say to any leaders that are listening to this, if you see drastic changes in any of the people that you lead, you may want to dig a little bit deeper to find out what's really going on. Be a real leader. That takes a commitment to your soldiers, your sailors, or anybody that you lead, airmen, airwomen, whoever. So you just made me think about that it's a leadership teaching moment too. So you moved off post when you came back to the States?
I moved off post before I left.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I moved off post before I left. I had two roommates that I truly loved. One, Miss Yaman, is still one of my best friends. I love her to death. And Sandra, she's also a wonderful girl. We had great times in the house through amazing parties where we invited, everybody in, and we had some really good times. It's not like I lived in squalor and in like some dark, deep depression. I mean, life had to go on. When it was time for me to get out, and you go in and you do your exit interviews, and I was talking to the actual psychiatrist, or I don't know if he was a psychiatrist or a social worker, and he was just asking questions, and he goes, if you don't acknowledge it, we can't do anything for you once you leave. So, and I remember that, and I took that with me, and it took me 10 years before I came to the VA and said, I have a problem. I'm dealing with something that I don't understand. I'm having flashbacks. I'm having nightmares. I'm having cold sweats. I can still hear them. Ooh.
Yeah, all part of the post-traumatic stress associated with trauma, and yeah, that's an emotional and a physical injury that is not tough, or that's not easy for anybody to deal with. So
I turned to alcohol. I did. I turned to alcohol.
Yeah.
And basically became an alcoholic within the first, I would say, 5 years of getting out of the service at 98. And I was a blackout drinker. And it was the only way that I could stop the thoughts and the remembrance was by blacking out. Because then when I woke up the next morning, all those thoughts and feelings were gone, because you blacked out. You tried to kill yourself on alcohol. And I don't mean 5, 10, 15 times. I'm probably closer to the 200-300 range of blackouts since leaving the military.
Yeah, one thing I said though is the courage. And I want to say this because first of all, you're not weak if you reach out for help. I was one of those guys that had been involved in a traffic accident where I drank an awful lot and I had an injury. And if I was having thoughts of suicide, and and I reached out for help too. So kudos to you for understanding that there is an issue going on. It took you a while. Some people are more stubborn or take a while. But you did. You reached out for help and you got it. And thank God you did, because you wouldn't be here today.
No, if I wouldn't have got help back, and it was 2008 when I first reached out to the VA with issues. And then the worst part is when you have to rip that Band-Aid off with the shrinks again, with the doctors. And then they switch you to another doctor and you have to rip that, off again. So over the 24 years, 25 years almost now, that it's a constant digging up a grave, because the VA is so inadequate to keep us with doctors that we get to see more than once a year. Because normally they come in, they're gone within 8-9 months, and you have to start and retell your story again. So you have to relive that again, and that was my struggle with the VA, was like, here you rip this Band-Aid off. I've got to go drink to take care of this, because I can't function normally, clammed up, isolated, angry, and hateful, and I went to the VA thinking that it was going to solve my problems. It's going to solve my problems. But the truth is, it didn't take it away. It's still here, But the best thing about the VA is they haven't given up on me. No matter how many times I have, pardon my language, screwed up and fucked the pooch, they have always been there to say, Alex, we're going to restart, we're going to reset, and we're going to get you through this. And it doesn't matter which VA I was at. If it was the one in Asheville, if it's been the one down here in Cape Coral or Port Charlotte, these doctors have gone above and beyond to help me with the MST. They know it's a struggle, and I've got to give them kudos, because they have not given up.
But you know what? I know something that's even bigger than that. You haven't given up. And that's to me, that's the whole ball of wax right there, is that sometimes it might seem like it would be easy to give up, but you're not made of that. You're stronger. There's something inside of Alexandria White that keeps you in the pooch. So you're going through that. You're getting better. I know that when I met you, you were tracking. You were doing really awesome, and like you are now. And I think you were in the financial services. We talked about that, but you were always wanting to help your fellow soldiers and veterans, and you were doing that. So tell us about you got the real estate license. You were doing all kinds of cool things. And
when we first met, I had just finished the entrepreneurial program for veterans from FGCU down here in Fort Myers.
Yeah.
And if you remember, I built an application to prevent suicide for veterans called EMO, the
I remember that
message outlet calendar. And then COVID hit, and unfortunately we had to scrap almost everything because, we couldn't work. COVID was difficult for everybody. And that was a very difficult year. And we'll briefly touch on that in a minute. But you met me during that process of going and saying, now I've healed myself to a point. I'm no longer a victim. I'm a survivor of this. Now, how can I help other soldiers? How can I help other people? And two of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to help veterans understand that when you get out of the service, you have money, and you can either be stupid, buy a car, wreck it in 5 weeks, and have nothing to show for your life, or go buy a house, or go invest your money. So I went into the health and annuity side with Modern Woodmen of America, which is a great company. It's a great fraternal order. If anybody's interested, please reach out to them. They are phenomenal. But I went to work for them so that I could help veterans financially with insurance and making sure that they were stable throughout their entire lives. And then I went and got my real estate license as well, so that I could make sure that on the VA side of it, and with VA loans and eligibility letters, that people would be able to afford the home they're in. Instead of just seeing pie in the sky, I want this 4-bedroom, 2-bath house at $400,000. Reality is my payment only allows me to afford a $200,000 house. So I try to work with veterans to understand what they can afford without overextenuating themselves. And at this point, I'm still working on my securities license, because that's my next step, is my Series 6. And
you got your real estate license. I know you got that. Yeah.
So I have my insurance and my real estate license already. and in the process of working for my securities license. But right now I work as an associate director for Ron Selesky, which you interviewed before me, for the Long Walk Home. And I met him through the same process I met you when I was trying to, talk to other veterans about the email application, how I could make it work better for veterans. And his story was just phenomenal. It was like, why are you walking barefoot? This is crazy.
It is crazy, but it works, right?
And I knew the Appalachian Trail, like some of the places that he has been. I mean, I grew up there, so I knew exactly what he had been through. And I always joke with him, like he'll say something and I'll go, dang, 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 like deliverance, and just joking with him because of the mountain terrain. I know exactly where he was. And I followed that, and I went through his 10 challenges to service through the organization, which helped me identify some angry problems that I was having still, and it helped me heal some relationships with my father before he passed away. My dad just died, and we're doing his celebration of life this Saturday. And
sorry about that. And I remember the discussions and the talks that we had about your dad. And
so dad life was a struggle as well, but he, being an Air Force non-vet, had his own issues. I mean, he was communication and a satellite engineer and all those good things, but he struggled, and my grandfather struggled in World War II. He was Navy and he was a corpsman, which is the reason I went to be a medic, following after a great old man.
That's cool. And, but there's a lot of interesting things that you're hitting upon, is the give back, the true concern, the healing process, the resilience, the never giving up. These are things that are molded in us from early on, but we develop as we move forward. And one thing about you, Alex, that I've always admired is that you never really talked about any of your things, but you were always talking about how you could help. And it's nice to see you in an environment now where you actually stepped up and in a big way for the last, the several years, helped yourself first, and realizing that by doing that you can do the things that you want to do, which is really cool. So I admire that about you. And that's, I just, it's people like you that make everything worthwhile, to know that we're not alone in this, what you just said, struggle.
So I went again several years with denying everything, denying the PTSD, denying the alcoholism. But when I actually took responsibility and accountability, not just for what happened back then, but for the actions that happened after that, because if you're a drinker, which you understand, you might say some things and do some things that you would really like to take back in life, but you can't. And it took me all of the 15 years to pull it all together and say, I'm accountable for all of it. I'm responsible for all of that because I was the one drinking. So when we started our group here, we have a MST group. I make them address their responsibilities. And that's a hard struggle for us because we always have that excuse. Oh, this happened to us. That's why we're this way, because you did this to me. And and the military did this to me, and it's your fault. It's your fault. But when you start taking accountability and responsibility, then you can transfer that hate and that anger and that, I wouldn't say suicidal thoughts, because I haven't personally had suicidal thoughts, but to that ambush on yourself and self-sabotage. Once you get past that stage and you've recovered to a survivor, you can reach back out to other people that are in that same mold where you were, that's trying to break out or be the donkey in a well, just throwing dirt, and just stepping on it until you get up out of that well. You know what I mean? So that's, I know exactly where I'm at. That's where I'm at, is pulling people through that now. And I want to touch on something that you said a little earlier, because in our group, we had a gentleman come in that was actually a high-ranking official and explain to our group why certain officers or higher ranking officials would not report issues of MST, because it actually tarnished their reputation too. And I didn't know that. And once I heard what could happen to that officer, like his whole career could be ruined because of something that his subordinates did. So, and I didn't fully grasp that. And when I did, it took a little bit of that sting out for me, a little bit of that hate out. Like, I didn't hate my commander anymore, like, because I understood. But when you're in it, you don't understand that. Right. So I just wanted to kind of come back to that and let you know that I actually heard why they do it. They shouldn't, but I heard why they do it. And that,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. No, that's good. And the thing is that there's always more to the story than meets the eye, and there's ways to get to the promised land, and a lot of them have very similar ways. But in a way, it's also what you just made me realize. It's also different for people. The way we react to certain things is going to have a different reaction based on the person and what happened and this and that. So. But the one thing is that you did something about it. And if you don't do something about it, then you live this life of going in and out of the black hole, in and out of that, and not living life to the fullest for sure. But that thing about, it doesn't get any, it doesn't change. It just gets different. And that's the thing, because you learn the skill sets that you need to learn if you're ever going to get through something like that. Yeah. So how can people
being able to give back those skill sets that I have learned over the years, even if some of them aren't healthy, because some of my coping mechanisms that truly help me wouldn't help you. Like, for me to tell you, oh, okay, don't live in it today, just go to the bar and drink a bottle of tequila and you're fine. That wouldn't help you, But unfortunately for me, it is my help. And because I don't have a way to cut off that 20%. Like, somebody explained it to me, it always runs in the background. It's always there. But when that pops in, you got to think how to change that. Don't think about it. Just keep moving on, instead of dwelling, which is what PTSD does, is you just dwell in your head and it just circles and circles. And,
what do they call that? There's a name for that, rumination,
Yes.
But what you just described, and I know people have heard of Joe Dispenza, he talks about that, when you're in that place and you start to feel that thing, those moments, that memory, he says, think of the word just change. Now, simple as it sounds, it sounds simple. Oh yeah, we just change it. But over time, and as we start to practice that type of strategy, it does start to alleviate some of those moments. Because I get it. I know those triggers never go away. I had that conversation with my wife today when we're out walking. They never go away. But what changes is the way we react to it. And if we don't react to it in a positive way, or I should say a healthier way, because drinking tequila might seem positive at the time, but in a more healthier way. In fact, tequila has gotten me in trouble, so I get it. But then we're never going to
demon as well.
Yeah,
the alcoholism is a demon,
Yes.
and it's a never-ending cycle when you're an alcoholic. You can stay sober for years and then have something that just triggers you and you fall off that wagon. With my alcohol story, I had several DUIs from drinking and driving because, I'm a blackout drinker. Didn't even know I was in the car. So
yeah.
the alcohol part of the story, for even a lot of veterans that I work with that don't have MST, they have said, well, I drank so much when I was in the service. We drank after work, we drank on the weekends, we were always partying together, and that social butterfly life that the military offers kind of comes to a close when you get out. That's why, like, the long walk home, it's like, what do you do now that you're a civilian? How do you find that camaraderie? How do you find that resilience in yourself when nobody's got your six anymore?
That's a good point. Now I got out long before you, and we didn't have all these social services, these transitional services when I got out, and there was nobody that spoke the language. And when you finally met a woman or a guy that spoke the language, it was like, didn't even matter if they were a Korean War veteran or Vietnam or whatever. you spoke the same language. So that's a good point that you raised, that there are ways that we can find people and networks that speak that language. And one of them is the Long Walk Home. So how can people find out more about the Long Walk Home? Where can they go, Alex?
You can go to our website at thelongwalkhome.org or personally reach out to me, and I'm Alex at thelongwalkhome.org. But one of our organizations, we are localized to Southwestern Florida. We're based out of Venice. We do community potlucks. We do weekend retreats where we go over the 10 challenges to serve. You know, we have wellness workshops that we do online with Ron Newhouse, which is a great instructor. We do financial workshops and anger management workshops. We do several other workshops, but our biggest one is the ASSIST training, which is called Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. So we actually teach people how to prevent suicide. We get mentors to come into the program that want to prevent the suicide. We put them through the ASSIST program if they're a veteran for free. You know, if you're a loved one, then you come in and it's refundable once you complete the program. But you are certified at that point to intervene and prevent suicide. So our suicide assist program is phenomenal for our mentors to help others to not be as likely to commit suicide by having that training.
Wow, that is phenomenal. You know, as a person that was on the end of the hotline, you know, looking for help, I can't say enough how programs like that can really add to the human condition in a huge way. You know, you mentioned the MST group that you're in Southwest Florida. If there's somebody out there, we don't pry, and I know, but if there's somebody out there that's dealing with a situation like that, how can they find out about that, Alex?
Okay, they would have to call me directly. They would have to call me directly. It is a very private group. Informational names aren't given out. Location isn't given out until, you know, 24 hours before our location meeting. And that's just to protect us, you know, as as the survivors, because a lot of us don't want our story out there. Again, you've known me for many years, and this is the first time I've sat down and said, all right, I got you. I got you, John.
And we've never really talked about it. We kind of knew about it, but you know, I know you knew my story, and that was one reason why we were talking about the phone app that you were working on for suicide and to educate people. So, you know, and again, thank you for that. You know, we it's sensitive, and I understand the sensitivities, and we share as much as we want to share, but we do know that telling a little bit of our story and sharing it, we know deep down that it can help others. And that was the biggest thing for me, Alex, was to know that I wasn't alone. And when I was in my own cognitive behavioral therapy sessions in Southwest Florida, they said that, you know, we can't save the relationships around you, but we can save you. And it took hard work, and you have to be willing to really want to get the help to move forward. And when she told me that first week that I wasn't alone, it like opened up a whole world to me, because I always thought I was the only guy that stuff like that happened to. And you know, and anyhow, so you're right, it is sensitive, but we do want to be cognizant of that fact. But if you do need,
just reach out, and they can reach me at alex@thelongwalkhome.org, or they can reach me by telephone at 239-841-5208. And that's, of course, Southwest Florida. We do go from Naples to Sarasota, and they're in between Fort Myers, Punta Gorda, in the neighborhood that I live in. But again, you'll get your notification 24 hours before the meeting, and so that we can get those localized people into the MST group.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I got another question before we sign off here on this first interview. Let me ask you this, Alex. You know, thinking about everything that you've been through and your life in America, what does freedom mean to you?
I'm gonna think on that. Freedom to me is hard work. Freedom is not free. To be really honest, freedom isn't free. If you want freedom, you have to find peace within yourself from your ideologies, because reality is that what you think isn't the perception of everybody else.
So for freedom, you have to work hard to be able to provide a lifestyle that you want and break free from the system, break free from your own system. But freedom is finding your peace, because your freedom and my freedom look different. I served my country to keep our country safe from, tyrannies that people really don't recognize. Like my young kids, they have no idea what it's like to be in another country, or what third world even means. They're so privileged nowadays. They don't even know what freedom is because they've had it so readily at their hands. So for me, freedom is a personal strive.
Well, there you have it, straight from the words of Alexandria White. And we're appreciative of you and who you are and your service to your country and your service to your country and to the people even after you've left. So I know I'll be seeing you, and wish you well. And thank you for being on this episode of Straight Outta Combat Radio. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, John, for having me.
Absolutely.
You gotta light 'em up before they burn it down.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Straight Outta Combat Radio, audio medicine from Green Zone Hero. If you liked what you heard, then tell others about us. Like us and download us. And please remember, freedom is not free, and combat veterans are vital assets. They're not broken.